in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the City of Santa Barbara Planning Commission meeting for January 21st, 2021. At this time, I'd like to ask the commissioners to come online and to ask our staff to first to let the public know how they can participate today with us electronically, either by computer or smartphone.
Thank you, Chair Schwartz. And for the public, if you would like to make public comment, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on the GoToWebinar panel. This indicates to me that you wish to speak, and you only need to click the hand once. A raised hand is indicated by a red arrow pointing down, as shown on the bottom right-hand portion of your screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Busk. Now I'll ask staff to facilitate a voice roll call. Glad to see you, Commissioner Escobedo, Vice Chair Escobedo. I know you were having some technical issues earlier today, and I think Commissioner Higgins may be a bit late to joining the hearing today. Ms. Rydell, are you ready to do a roll call for us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Heidi Rydell. I'll begin the roll call.
Okay. Excellent, thank you.
Is my audio coming out all right?
You're cutting in and out. Let's
right.
Continue to see if we can make it through. We have a short meeting today, so.
All right, we'll start with Chair Schwartz.
Here.
Vice Chair Escobedo.
Here.
Commissioner Bonderson.
Here.
Commissioner Higgins. Absent. Commissioner Lodge.
Here.
Commissioner Reed.
Here.
Commissioner Wiscombe.
Here.
That is everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rydell. Before we move right into preliminary matters, I wanted to just recap for the commission and then to let the public know that we have an abbreviated hearing today. I'm going to adjourn at 10 to 4, so that's 3:50, in order to allow City TV to begin broadcasting a special meeting of the City Council where the AIA Advocacy Committee is going to be presenting on the 2020 design charrette. So with that, we have a very sort of a tightly facilitated meeting. And let's first go to preliminary matters, and then I'll talk a little bit about how we're gonna handle the time management for our one new item. So Mr. Busk, are there any requests for continuances, withdrawals, postponements, or addition of X agenda items today?
Thank you, Chair Schwartz. I just wanted to mention, even though it's noted on our agenda, but the second item labeled as item 3B on the agenda at 119 East Coda Street for the police station height exception findings, that item has been postponed indefinitely, and we will renotice it for the next meeting that it will be agendized. Thank you.
Thank you. Any announcements or appeals, Mr. Busk, other than the announcement you just made regarding postponement?
Yes, thank you, Chair Schwartz. It's not a new announcement, but just a reminder that the bicycle share project has been appealed, and that will be heard by the City Council on January 26th. That's this coming Tuesday. And Commissioner Higgins will be representing the Planning Commission. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Now let's go to review, consideration, and action on the Planning Commission's January 7th meeting minutes. Are there any revisions that the commissioners would like to make to the draft meeting minutes, either that you provide to staff in advance or that you would like us to note today? Okay, seeing none, would someone like to make a motion to approve? Thank you, Commissioner Lodge.
I'll second it.
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. Any discussion on that motion? Very good. Ms. Rydell, would you please do a voice vote on that motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will begin the voice roll call vote. We'll start with Commissioner Bonderson.
Yes.
Commissioner Escobedo or Vice Chair Escobedo?
Yes.
Commissioner Lodge?
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscombe?
Yes.
Commissioner Higgins? Absent.
Yes.
Commissioner Reed?
Can you hear me?
He's here.
I'm on audio.
All right,
Sorry about that. Yes.
no problem. Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Chair Schwartz?
Yes.
That is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rydell. Now back to Ms. DeBusk. Do we have any members of the public who would like to speak to us on items not on our agenda today?
Thank you, Chair Schwartz. For anyone that would like to make a public comment on an item not on today's agenda, please click the hand icon on the control panel. The hand will turn red, and that indicates to me that you wish to speak. And as of right now, let me take a look to see if anyone has raised their hand. And Chair Schwartz, I'm not seeing anything. I would like to ask Heidi Rydell if we've received written public comment on items not on today's agenda.
Thank you, Allison, and to the chair and the rest of the commission. We have not received any written correspondence for any items that are not on today's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. DeBusk and Ms. Rydell. With that, we're going to move right ahead to our one new item today. It is the Capital Improvement Program review, and this is the city's draft 5-year capital improvement program. I'm going to read it into the record. But before I do that, again, I want to recap the extremely tight time frame in which we're going to be reviewing tremendous amount of information. I'm hoping commissioners had their questions answered in advance from staff, but we look to facilitate that. And the questions today will need to be limited to approximately 20 minutes per commissioner, and that includes questions and comments. So what I'm going to suggest, a little bit out of order than how we usually handle questions and comments, if you would please feel free to bridge together one right after the other, your questions, and then go right into comments. That will help us manage the 20 minutes per commissioner, again, so that we can adjourn. I will need to adjourn for certain at 10 to 4, and Ms. DeBusk and I have talked about how to make this happen. There will be a 20-minute staff presentation, which we'll do next. Welcome, Mr. Hagmark. So if the commissioners would like to turn your cameras off at this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Hagmark without further ado, and we'll begin the staff presentation. Let me first read this into the record. This is a review of projects added to the city's draft 5-year capital improvement program for fiscal years 2022 to 2026 for consistency with the general plan per government code 65103C and 65401. Thank you, and I'll turn it over to you, Mr. Hagmark. Again, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Schwartz, Commissioners. Joshua Hagmark, Acting Public Works Director here today. And I'm going to move really quickly along here. I want to say, you've seen this many times over. This is our 5-year CIP plan. We're going to go over what we have in here. We're focusing on are the new items that are being added. You will notice consistently through here, we're dealing with climate change, starting to see this seeping into our CIP. So a lot of that is the sea level rise issues. And we're going to be reviewing this, obviously looking for making your confirmation that this is consistent with the general plan. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Christy Velasquez, our admin analyst, who's going to walk us through the presentation today. Thank you.
Welcome, Ms. Velasquez.
Thank you, Chair Schwartz, and thank you, Joshua Hagmark. So today's purpose is for Planning Commission to find projects added, as Joshua mentioned, to the draft CIP for consistency with the general plan. There are 308 projects total in the draft, of which 57 are new projects in this update. The other 251 projects were previously found to be consistent with the general plan. Next slide. Here's some sample policies consistent with these new projects. General plan policies include, but are not limited to, circulation improvements, to improve traffic flow in conjunction with providing improved access for pedestrians, bicycles, and public and private transit through physical roadway improvements. You also see accessibility as a theme throughout these projects. We just want to make sure that there's universal accessibility for persons with disabilities, seniors, and other special needs populations, and make sure that's a priority in the construction of any new development. And then we also have our local coastal program policies, including, but not limited to, harbor dredging and beach nourishment, as well as sea level rise adaptation plan. Next slide. So what is a capital project? A capital project is generally defined as an activity that creates, improves, replaces, repairs, or maintains a fixed asset with a total cost and inventory of 100,000 or greater, and with a life expectancy of more than 5 years. Here's one example. The picture you see is the Quiniento Street Bridge Replacement Project that removed and replaced the 88-year-old bridge over Sycamore Creek in the East Side neighborhood. For budgeting purposes, large one-time expenses such as major software applications and studies or plans are also included in the CIP for transparency and communication with the community. Next slide. So goals of the CIP. This helps us provide a planning document for capital improvements over a 5-year period. This includes supportive information as to the needs for such improvements. It also helps us identify any unmet capital needs based on anticipated funding levels, and provides a plan for capital improvements as the basis for preparing the 2-year capital budget for the coming budget cycle. The CIP also assists with securing grant funding. Next slide. So the selection of projects for the CIP does not follow one-size-fits-all priority setting. This is due to a variety of specialized funding sources and the framework of adopted plans and policies. The common prioritization theme that you'll see among the programs is safety as most important, followed by maintaining existing infrastructure and addressing new demands. Projects are competing for funding, whether it be restricted funds, grants, or general fund. But it's important to keep in mind that the CIP is a living document. There are a lot of moving pieces affecting prioritization, and it's mainly funding availability. Projects listed in the first 2 years are considered budget-ready projects and have been prioritized by that program area, and again, become the basis for preparation of the city's annual capital budget. Next slide. This is just an overview of those funds and restrictions that I mentioned in the previous slide. So starting at the top and going clockwise, the city's general fund accounts for activities and services traditionally associated with governments, such as parks and recreation, library, and police and fire, which are financed primarily through tax-generated revenues. We have enterprise funds that are generated from user fees, and this includes airport, downtown parking, water, wastewater, and waterfront. We also have internal service funds, and these are funds received by departments to pay for services provided by other departments, such as building maintenance and fleet management. Next are the designated funds, such as a voter-approved tax that is designated for specific types of projects. A good example of this is Measure A, whose funds are designated for streets projects. And then we have grants and debt issuance or loans. Next slide. So the table before you is the first 2 years of the CIP broken down by projects proposed for funding and those that are unfunded. We've also included an estimate for general fund Measure C funding at roughly $23 million annually, and this is for planning purposes. The Measure C funds will be determined and allocated during the budget process, and then the project amounts will be updated accordingly. Next slide. So combined, we with funded and unfunded projects, they total roughly $1.18 billion. Approximately $343 million, the blue piece, of total funding has been identified and proposed, with an additional estimated Measure C funding in the amount of $138 million. That's that smaller blue piece. And again, this will be allocated during the budget process. While unfunded projects total about $707 million, and that's the orange piece, and this includes the future needs. Next slide. This chart shows us where the proposed funding is coming from. So you have proposed projects totaling almost $481 million. These projects have been identified or have identified funding and are designated as proposed for funding in the CIP. Starting with the largest piece, we have water and wastewater. These are your blue and gray pieces in the chart. And they have a combined total of $207 million, which includes enterprise funds and state revolving fund loans. And then there's the Measure C proposed funding with projects totaling almost $98 million. That's the orange piece. We have grants or public-private partnerships from various sources totaling $40 million. That's the yellow piece there. And then airport with approximately 38 or 34 million, and streets or Measure A funding in the amount of 33 million. That's the green piece. Next slide. So this is your, these are your unfunded projects, totaling approximately 707 million. We have a large amount of unfunded projects seeking grant opportunities, approximately 390 million. Since there is uncertainty associated with successful grant acquisition, these projects are considered unfunded for purposes of the CIP. Then we have airport projects in the amount of almost 107 million. That's the orange piece. And then there's the anticipated debt issuance for the police station, approximately 88 million. And there's the green piece. And then we have some general fund projects that are unfunded with a total of approximately 77 million. That's your dark blue. Next slide. So as Mr. Hagmark mentioned, this CIP cycle, departments were asked to enter near-term actions in response to the sea level rise adaptation plan. This resulted in 10 new projects related to sea level rise, totaling almost 22 million, of which 20 million is estimated as future needs for the Laguna Pump Station and Tide Gate relocation project. And then we'll see these 10 new SLR projects in the next few slides. Next slide. So we'll get into these new projects. As mentioned previously, we have identified 308 projects in the draft CIP, of which 57 are new projects for this update. Airport has added 8 new projects, and we'll be addressing some needs outlined by the Airport Master Plan. High priority projects include modernizing and enhancing the passenger experience within the airline terminal with upgrades at the ticket counter and baggage claim, replacement of the intercom systems, and completing phase 3 of the Northeast Apron Rehabilitation Project. Fire has added 4 new projects guided by the goals of the fire department strategic plan as well as regulatory compliance. These include upgrading the automatic vehicle response and routing system, which will allow units to be dispatched using GPS technology, and this will have a profound impact on response times. Next slide. Information technology has added a high priority project to replace the city's current voicemail system to accommodate an upgrade of the city's email system. And this is a critical prerequisite for implementing Office 365. Library has added 4 new projects. Significant projects at the Eastside Library include construction of a garage to safely store the new Library on the Go van and installing security equipment and cameras. And then Parks and Recreation will be improving pedestrian access and recognizing Chumash heritage with interpretive displays at Ambassador Park. A significant project will be repairing the Plaza Del Mar bandshell, which was constructed in 1919. Next slide. Facilities does a great job identifying needs at various city facilities to maintain city infrastructure. 2 new projects listed here are addressing general fund facilities, such as minor renewal Fire Station 1 to include plumbing, painting, and electrical upgrades, and high priority security upgrades at 630 Garden Street building by way of access controls and cameras, just to name a few. On this screen, I just wanted to call out those that are in the blue font, those new projects in blue font represent projects that are driven by sea level rise. Wastewater and water both added projects to support additional planning efforts to adapt the wastewater and water systems to the potential impacts of sea level rise. And then sustainability and resilience is a new department this current fiscal year, and they've added 3 projects to the CIP. A high priority for this department is to develop and regularly update a 5-year sea level rise adaptation implementation plan that will further refine and prioritize these actions. Next slide. Waterfront CIP includes 17 new projects guided by the Harbor Master Plan, State Tidelands Trust, ADA Transition Plan, and the Sea Level Rise Adaptation Plan. Significant projects here include the dredging of the Harbor Federal Channel, renewing the Marina 2 restroom, and upgrading the marina management software. Next slide. The CIP is brought before the Planning Commission to streamline the streets capital program review and approval process as required by the city's circulation element, providing you with the opportunity to review and comment on the proposed streets capital CIP and provide guidance to the city council in the physical development of the city consistent with the city charter. So new projects for the streets transportation section include bike facilities, bridges, corridor improvements, pedestrian enhancements, traffic signal maintenance, and again, a response to a sea level rise. One high priority project is replacing the central software for the traffic management system, and this will help to maintain coordination between adjacent traffic signals. And then next slide. And that will conclude the CIP update for fiscal years FY22 through 26. We do have CIP reps from each department attending to assist with answering any questions you may have regarding these new projects.
Thank you very much, Ms. Velasquez. I think what I'll do now is ask the planning commissioners to come online and turn it over to Ms. DeBus to see if we have any members of the public who would like to speak to us on this item today.
Thank you, Chair Schwartz. For members of the public, if you would like to make a public comment on this item, please raise your hand by clicking on the hand icon on your GoToWebinar control panel. This indicates to me that you wish to speak. You only need to click the hand icon once, and a raised hand is indicated by a red arrow pointing down, as shown in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And everyone will have 2 minutes to speak. As of right now, I'm not seeing any raised hands. I'll give it just a little bit more time. And in the meantime, I will ask Ms. Rydell if we've received any written correspondence on this item.
Thank you, Allison, and to the chair and the rest of the commission. We did receive one letter of public correspondence that was distributed to the commission prior to this hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rydell. And I'm not seeing any requests for public comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. DeBus. So in managing the balance of our time, and we will be taking a 5-minute break, I'm going to say at 3 o'clock or thereabouts. I'm going to ask indulgence of my colleagues if we're going to forego the administrative agenda today, which is usually at the end of our hearing. So we won't give liaison reports, and that will give us a little more time to inquire and comment. And not that we could shape today's constraints, but I just want to apologize to my colleagues in that, especially for Commissioners Reed, Bonderson, and Vice Chair Escobedo, Planning Commission typically has much more time in a hearing to thoroughly review, inquire about, and comment on a 5-year CIP. So this is extraordinarily constrained and, again, not ideal, but it's what we have to contend with today. So with that, let's go ahead and who would like to go first with questions and comments? And again, we have an array of staff members here, so please feel free to ask it of any. Commissioner Wiscombe, you're up first.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have a lot of questions. As you stated, a lot of us have been through this before, but I do have a couple, and I don't even know to whom to ask the questions, but I want to start with page 21 of 110 in our report, which is the Business Application Bridge Fund. And this allocates $50,000 annually for the duration of this particular CIP for $300,000 total. And it states that a recent report by Woodhill Group said unplanned purchases of software applications to support emergent business needs as they arise. So first of all, what is the recommendation in the Woodhill report? Does this match it? And number two, second part of that question is, what is an example of an unplanned purchase of software application to support emergent business needs? In other words, what have we faced in the past where maybe we've had a deficit? I guess Mr. Foray is going to hop on here.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, Ms. Wiscombe. My name is Matt Fuller. I'm currently the interim information technology director. This is an item that came out of a recent audit as part of our allocation study that the city conducted. And what they identified was a mitigation to angst that that various departments feel for projects and expenses and needs related to software that arise where we have long planning, time horizons. So we start working on the budget and what we're going to fund and what we're going to implement 18 months, between the 6-month planning process and say 11 months of a fiscal year. And so if we haven't planned for everything that could arise, then several times a year, departments will come to us and say, we really have this business need for X, Y, and Z. And we say, great, we don't have any money for it. And so this was simply a small reserve, I guess, for lack of a better term, that would bridge the gap between fiscal years, between the formal revenue raising process and allocations among departments that would just fill some needs. And we wouldn't have to ask another department, say a general fund department, that's great, we can help you scope that, and you're going to have to come up with the funding. And so this is just a way of keeping business processes going and not telling a department, wonderful, you're on our list, and 14 months from now, we're going to get right on that. And so that's really the intent of this, is really a reserve that'll get us from one fiscal year to another. Some examples of what's come up, they're myriad. I mean, we had them, a lot of them, for example, with COVID, although that was kind of an outlier year, but that, we had a number of those. For public engagement processes, for example, we've scoped and we've been bringing on Bang the Table as an application for public engagement for various types of projects. What's another? Add-ons. Another category would be add-ons to existing enterprise applications that we already have. So, for example, we have Acela, we have Cartograph, we have, as an asset management program, we have Highland OnBase and various integrations. We have GIS applications. Well, many times there are other modules that either from the same vendor or from a third party that would integrate that just increases functionality and everybody wants it. And we say, again, we don't have a funding source. So I hope that helps to answer the need for this.
Yes, Mr. Forth, thank you very much for that answer. I appreciate your honesty in saying it's mitigation related to angst, because I can understand that things have to keep moving along. Would you say that, just as a follow-up to this, then my next question is going to ask about Acela, but would some of this funding be used for the unexpected issues that come up with Acela? Because I know that that's been ongoing for quite a few years.
For Acela specifically, no, ma'am, we weren't thinking that.
Okay.
So
okay,
this really is completely separate from the Acela application. This is really for things that aren't on our radar at all.
Okay, because you mentioned Acela, so that's why I was wondering. Okay, and is this the specific amount of money that was recommended by the Woodhill Group?
The report doesn't recommend a specific amount. When we spoke to the consultant, they actually had a much bigger number of, say, 100,000 verbally, but that wasn't printed. So we thought that was fairly high, and we looked at the kinds of requests that we're getting, and so we reduced it by half.
Okay, great. Okay, I just have 2 more questions, and then I can go into my comments. On page 22, Mr. Fore, I think this would be for you, enterprise applications, business continuity, cloud migration. So it says here, I want to know if the Acela migration, is Acela migration ready given the issues over the many years with this platform? And you have a specific statement in there that is a little bit curious. I mean, I understand it, but some of our newer commissioners wouldn't. Is subject to the availability of departmental subject matter experts. So,
Yeah.
so
Sure,
'cause this allocates $220,000 over the next 2 fiscal years, and will this complete the Acela migration into our system? Are we finally going to get there? I guess is.
Sure. There are a number of questions in there. So the couple of things. So Acela has been fully functional for some time. And one of the benefits of, if you can say, and I hesitate to say the word benefit with something like a pandemic, but one of the silver linings, I should say, of a pandemic is that we had 2 things converge all at one time. The first was a need for everything to be done remotely. As much city business that could be done remotely, we had to get done. So we had that need. We also had a lot more bandwidth immediately on the part of city staff, if you think back in March. And so that really coalesced around fully launching what they call the ACA module of Acela, that front-facing piece where folks can apply for a permit, pay for a permit. That all got wrapped up right then in the second week of the pandemic. So it is fully functional at the moment. What this speaks to, this capital project speaks to, this is a recognition of the enterprise industry as a whole, that everything is being pushed to the cloud. Everything. The entire direction of everything is going to the cloud. And that's not necessarily out of customer demand. It's from the vendor side. The vendors are saying, we don't want to 12 different versions of an application that jurisdiction clients could have on their own. If you're hosting this on site, we can stay on whatever version we want. We can put our own internal resources into maintaining that. That's really inefficient for software vendors. So if you look at the entire industry as a whole, everything is being pushed to the cloud. The second reason for that is from a disaster continuity standpoint, right? That's just prudent that we don't want all of our on-site data and application and business processes on site so that if we have a wildfire or an earthquake or whatever, everything gets wiped out. So if we can put this in the cloud where that same data set is in 6 different locations, geographic locations around the world, then we have redundancy and continuity should there be a disaster. So with that as background, this particular CIP entry just recognizes that we need to plan ahead to move our major enterprise applications to the cloud. The context behind this is, and there are a couple variables of which ones we choose and when. The first one is priority to the city in terms of which ones do we want, fully secure. The second is the software itself ready? And so we looked, for example, at our financial management system. That to me is number 1, but they weren't ready yet. As we looked at the cloud capability and the risk associated, we said, that's great. We're going to hold off until that vendor's ready for it. And then the third one is major upgrades, major versioning, and moving to the cloud takes a lot of testing. It takes a lot of testing on behalf of city staff to verify that what we had before and what we migrated either to a version or to the cloud is in place and the integrity is there and everything works the way that we intended, including all the integrations that come in. Because we'll have an enterprise application that's integrated with a whole number of other city systems. And so it's testing those integrations. That takes a lot of work. That's why we're recognizing that this is really dependent upon departmental users and subject matter experts to have the time and the bandwidth to be able to do that testing and verify that everything works.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That's, I think, the end of my questions for you. I think my next question might be for Ms. Velasquez or someone. I wanted to go back to slide 24, I think it is. If we could put that back up on the screen for the presentation. Yes, okay, is this it? Yes, okay. On this slide is, I have to kind of reword my question here. On this slide is the Sea Level Rise Program Development and Administration. I did not see that in our packet here. Is that because that's an existing project, or, but here it's listed as a new project? So can someone answer that question for me? Because a lot of these sea level rise projects, which are mostly studies, will relate to the monitoring data that we gather when to determine where we are in sea level rise. So, so I just wondered, first of all, why this wasn't in our packet, or is it, and I missed it?
It
And-
should be, oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes, Commissioner. Yes, it's on page 47 of 110. And we have Alelia Parento here from, she's our energy and climate manager, and she can help answer any questions related to that project.
Oh, yes, it is. I'm sorry, I did miss that. Okay, okay, that's great. Okay, I totally missed that. I actually, I looked over it. Oh, you know why? Because it's not in the sea level rise section with the S's. That's part of it. Okay, that's great. And then, so this starts, so I was looking at the sea level rise adaptation, beach nourishment, and sediment management, which is on page 62 of 110. And that's why I couldn't find this particular entry. So I assume then, from looking at this now, that we will have enough data to be able to, monitoring data, to be able to start doing these studies and have them be realistic studies based on the data that we have. So the timing's going to work out, is that's really my question, between the monitoring and the new studies like the beach nourishment sediment management, where they want to update the Coastal Regional Sediment Management Plan from 2009.
Yes, that's correct. It's been planned out that way. Ms. Hedrick, I don't want to add to that.
Chair Schwartz, Commissioner Wiscombe, yes, that would be the goal. The shoreline monitoring program is not currently funded. We are seeking funding for that program, and so we will need that funding to get going. And some of these other projects we might not hold up if there is an opportunity, such as working with Beacon toward relooking at beach nourishment. But ideally, we would get the shoreline monitoring program off the ground soon.
So is the Sea Level Rise Program Development and Administration budget, does that include the shoreline monitoring?
No, and not in the CIP. So basically the adaptation program is just managing the overall program. It's possible that the shoreline monitoring program could be its own project that's, let's say, administered by Beacon and we're just helping, or administered by the waterfront, or it could be out of sustainability and resilience department, the same team that is working on the adaptation program. But because it really is a separate project that we're seeking funding for, we wanted to keep it as a separate project in the CIP.
Okay, okay. But, okay, I'll leave it at that. I just hope we have enough monitoring data to make these studies be as effective and as realistic as possible when we get to them, because there's quite a few of them, which I do appreciate. So, okay, Madam Chair, those are my questions. You want me to just run down my comments? quickly?
Yes, please, if you're comfortable doing that.
Yeah, I'm fine with that. You know, in addition to the necessary public safety projects, which we all appreciate, I appreciated the potential revenue generating projects like the Faulkner Gallery kitchen remodel. I think we don't have a lot of those in this particular CIP, but I think the revenue generating projects are always good. Madam Chair, just for 1 sec, are the minutes going to capture our comments? I would hope that they do.
Yes, let me just confirm with Mr. Busk.
Yes, Chair Schwartz and Commissioner Wiscombe, they will.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Busk. Okay, and then I always appreciate the city seeking grant funding wherever possible, and I have to congratulate staff on the successes so far. And Ms. Velasquez said 40 million in grants, which is just terrific. I mean, we always do a great job there, and keep up the good work. I'm also excited to have projects that involve community, such as the geospatial inventory of bike infrastructure, where there'll be a work study group program with students. I think that's very important to have students participate in this if that's their field of interest, and I like that partnership a lot. And obviously, having been a member of the Sea Level Rise subcommittee, I'm excited to see the necessary funding for the studies associated with sea level rise, because I think we need to be forward thinking and prepared on that subject with our public assets and our infrastructure potentially in harm's way. And my final comment is that I find the CIP, the additional projects in the CIP consistent with the general plan. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. And I was just about to remind all of us, this is on page 1 of the staff report under recommendation, that we do need to find the projects consistent with the general plan. And again, apologies for the highly constrained timeframe in which we are reviewing these projects. I also wanted to invite any of my colleagues as a follow-on to today's hearing, if you'd like to follow up through Mr. Busk to further educate yourself about any of these projects, I'm sure staff would be very receptive to providing the opportunities to do that. It just unfortunately can't be part of today's public hearing. So who on the commission would like to go next? Again, within the 20-minute time frame for both questions and comments. And again, Mr. Busk and I are watching the clock carefully. Commissioner Bonderson, please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. I don't know exactly who would be the person to target my questions to, so I'll just ask them in general and see who turns on their cameras and mics to answer. I wanted to have a brief follow-up question with regard to computer hardware, software, that Commissioner Wiscombe touched on quite a bit. And I wanted to ask 2 simple questions about that. Hello, Mr.
Do we have a
Ford.
specific page, Commissioner Bonderson, that Mr. Bolton could put up? And I'm going to ask all the commissioners to please, if there are specific pages to reference, Mr. Bolton would be happy to have those on the screen for us all to follow along.
Of course, thank you. It is page 23 of 110. And it's the page that refers to the Microsoft Office updates. I think that Commissioner Wiscombe asked more of a broad question and got a lot of details from you. My question is very specific about who will benefit from some of these upgrades and some of the general technology IT things that are in the packet as a whole, even if it's not on this page. Does it go to a specific office or department, or does it go to everyone broadly when you do an update?
For the most part, it goes to everybody broadly. And so to use this example, this upgrade to Office 365, this would be migrating the entire city's system onto Office 365. The reasons for that are, and I'll just click them off quickly. The first is just from a From a collaboration standpoint, it has all the collaboration tools of departments being able to version documents, share documents, not have to go through the city server to get to them. It's an internet connection, gets you to all of your city files and all the collaboration tools that are there. The second one, from an efficiency standpoint, why this is really bubbling up to the top from a interdepartmental standpoint, is from Public Records Act requests, for example. This gives us unlimited mailbox storage, and no longer will we have email archives that are outside of the network that aren't searchable. So we're really looking for tools to cut down on the amount of time it takes for us to do Public Records Act requests and be able to produce those documents. This does that. And thirdly, again, COVID really taught us that we need to be ready and have the tools in hand to be able to work remotely right then, right now. And so, my IT staff, I have to, give them all the kudos in the world. They launched nearly 800 employees remotely in a matter of weeks. It was a Herculean effort, but with something like Office 365, all one needs is an internet connection, and we don't have complicated VPN systems that we have to deal with in that regard. So certainly a project like this is citywide, and I would argue really benefits the community because we're doing our work better. We are up and running immediately. There's no disruption, and so therefore we can serve everyone else.
And you're connected to one another more easily.
Yes.
I understand that. Do you have possibly an estimated number off the top of your head, roughly, of how many people this will serve, how many city employees this may reach?
Order of magnitude, 800 or 900 between permanent and hourlies.
Thank you. That helps me understand the project total a lot better. The next question I have, I may need to say goodbye to you, Mr. Four. I don't know if
Sure.
This next question is with regard to the airport. And for Timmy, if you could please take us to page 11, please. Hello, Mr. Reynolds, welcome. My question is, again, it might be a broad question, it might touch on multiple pages, but I was particularly interested in the infrastructure enhancement page. And I wanted to know, this is part of the new terminal. And when I say new, I wanted to ask you, when was this terminal built? And when was the last time that this infrastructure was put into place as we see it today? We can't hear you, sir. Not yet. Try one more time.
How about now?
You got it. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem.
To answer the first question, the terminal was built in 2009 through 2011. It was put into service in 2011. So there has not been any modifications to the inside of the terminal since that time. This project recognizes the historical year we had in 2019, where we had almost 1 million passengers fly through the terminal. And because of that, we are looking at increasing basically the holding area of the baggage chute area, as well as the bag claim, as well as ticketing. So it's just, when we built the terminal, we didn't build out the interior fully. We didn't build out the ticketing counter fully. We had a lot of empty spaces. So this is just kind of completing what we started back in 2010, 11.
Thank you. And I also noticed, where is it? Gosh, now I can't find it. If I say it, you might know exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Was there a proposed additional terminal being proposed here on one of the other pages?
There is a terminal expansion being proposed on one of the other pages. I'm not sure which one it is, but that, yeah, here, I can find it. I think it's going to be the airline terminal south.
On page
expansion.
10.
Page 10. Thank you, Commissioner Wiscombe. Thank you. I was going forward instead of backwards, and I have it all marked up. Thank you. Yes, page 10, please.
There we go.
I was interested in knowing more about this terminal and how these two terminals relate to each other, how they may or may not work together.
Sure. Again, this project was in response to 2019 and the passenger traffic we saw in 2019. But the master plan that we started in 2012 and completed in 2017 identifies terminal expansion as part of our plan. And so this is not a separate terminal, yet it's a terminal that is an addition to the existing structure. The existing structure is actually designed for this, it's designed to accept this. So this would just be a build out of the existing terminal on the southern end to accommodate future growth, which as of 2019, we certainly saw the need for.
Thank you so much for explaining that so quickly and simply, because that I think is an important factor for me to understand priorities in the airport master plan, the airport projects here. If you were to say one is a priority or more important, needs to happen more quickly, which one would you suggest would be, the priority at this time? Would they both be equal?
I think that the passenger enhancements would be first, recognizing that project is very easy to implement.
Okay.
It's all internal. The terminal expansion, that's going to go through planning, design review. It's a long-term, real big project, whereas we can modify ticket counter pretty easily.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And the last question I have about the airport is the parking garage. I was particularly interested in the airport, as you can see. I was curious to know more about how many parking spots there are now and how much this would help to increase capacity and service for the rental car companies that we find at the airport.
Okay, first I'll address the parking garage and the capacity we have now. I don't have that number in front of me, but I believe it's about 970. Could be off a little bit on that. In 2019, we found ourselves shuttling to our overflow lot, which is over across Hollister. So although we provide shuttles, it's a passenger inconvenience. The parking garage is again to alleviate parking concerns on site versus shuttling passengers across Hollister. The parking garage, however, does not affect the rental car company ready return lot. And there's actually another added project, the Southfield project. That project will actually not only provide additional rental car ready return parking, but it will also provide what we call return overnight aircraft parking for 3 additional narrow body aircraft on the terminal apron. Because again, in 2019, we got to the point where we had not enough rental car parking, not enough passenger parking, nor not enough aircraft parking. So that project will alleviate both the airline terminal apron concerns. It will provide additional rental car ready return parking. And then the parking garage would obviously relieve the passenger parking at the terminal.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I appreciate all your feedback. And my next question is leaving the airport. So I'm going to ask a question. Let's see how I can approach this. My next question is about the Marina breakwater. And I have 2 questions. So Timmy, you could probably go to page 57, 56 or 57. And we can start with page 56. And I don't know who I should be addressing my questions to. Hello. Welcome.
Commissioner Patterson.
Good afternoon. I'm making my rounds through all the different faces. Nice to meet you. My question is about the Marina 4 replacement project. I was very curious about this. I was interested to find out how often do projects like this take place? Is it somewhat of a circular project where you help to update and revitalize different marinas at different times, or is this new? I don't know the history.
Yeah, Chair Schwartz, Commissioner Bonderson, I'd be happy to answer that question. There's 4 marinas down at the waterfront, and so the most recent replacement was Marina 1. These are typically projects that require more capital dollars than we have in our budget, and so we take out loans, typically from the Department of Boating and Waterways. And so we're currently servicing debt on a pretty large loan from the Marina 1 replacement. So it'd be kind of hard to do them all at once. We wanted to kind of parse these out in the CIP because Marina 4 and 3 and 2 are kind of due for replacement within the next decade or so. And so that $500,000 placeholder is really our internal cost. The cost of replacing the marina will be much higher, but we typically borrow that money.
Do you also, are you also eligible for grants that help with this type of thing?
There are some grants. I'm not exactly certain on the level of grant funding for marina replacements. The California Department of Boating and Waterways is kind of our one-stop shop for funding and loans for that nature. And so come that time, we'll chase up any grants that we can that can help support these kind of projects.
Thank you. So to basically close out my question, the number we see on the screen here, that is without any additional support, without the idea of grants, without the loan. This is the raw number that you're looking for?
That's really kind of a placeholder for the waterfront portion of a large project. And so sometimes we'll pay for some of the upfront design and things that need to go into in advance, even just kind of getting the loan going. And so that's really a placeholder for a small portion of the overall project cost in hopes that we would either borrow the remaining amount of funds or receive it by grant. So.
Thank you. My next question is on page 57, and it's with regard to the handrail replacement. My first question is this page, is this topic limited to the handrails, or is it more of a discussion about that sidewalk and the wall on the opposite side? Is it very, very specific, or is it kind of that whole definition of space?
I think I understand what you're getting at. This was really just a continuation project. So if you look around the entire waterfront, in that photo, there is the tighter handrails with the bars that are closer together. And so those had been done previously, and they kind of stopped at the breakwater. My assumption it was due to funding, and they were going to phase this project. So this is really just the next phase of taking that same style of fencing all the way up to the end of the breakwater. With sea level rise and considerations for changes that might need to be made to the breakwater, we may reconsider this project as if we're going to have to be raising the breakwater or doing substantial work there, it may not make sense to do this one in this time frame.
I think you sort of read my mind. That was sort of going to be the follow-up of my question, because I was curious to know how it's related to the rest of the space. So thank you. You jumped ahead on me. I appreciate it. Chair Schwartz, I have just a couple comments to make, and I'm done with my questions. May I just go ahead and make those comments quickly?
Yes, please do. Thank you, Mr. Wilshire. We'll excuse you for the moment. Go ahead, Commissioner Bonderson.
Actually, you know what? Before I make the statement, I might as well ask the question on record. And I'm not sure who to ask it to, but I was curious to learn more about, on page 3 and 4, we have a list of 57 new projects that the staff report is ultimately targeting. And I was curious to know if there is a type of hierarchy to this, if there's a priority. To me, it looks like it's an alphabetical order. Who could I ask a question to about the way that this list has been prepared? Mr. Hadd, hello.
Hello. Commissioner Bonderson. So yeah, there is no priority because all of these have different funding sources. So there isn't and again, there's a much larger capital program behind these. These are just the new ones that have been added. I hope that clarifies it, but there isn't a priority to that.
Thank you. So the list that we have in our packet, the list we have here before us on screen, is just a list of projects. Do you have, or does it exist, a priority listing, a format in which we understand what is urgent, and what, for example, the handrail project, it's forecasted, it's of interest, but it may or may not take place the way it's being proposed, so it may not be a priority. Do we have a list, something like that?
We do not. We do not have a priority list like that. There's multiple reasons we don't, and I think it kind of comes back to the various boards and commissions who oversee some of these. For example, I can speak to the Water Commission. We're typically talking to them about the various CIP projects, but a lot of them have different funding sources and different issues going on. Some of them have some environmental constraints that limit the timing. So we don't go through and prioritize them per se, and I'm sure the other programs have other constraints. So I can't say that there is not a priority list to that.
Thank you. Ms. Velasquez, did you want to add? I see you there.
Yes, thank you. Chair Schwartz and Commissioner Bonderson. Throughout the presentation, the list of new projects in the different slides, I did put a red asterisk next to those that the departments have prioritized. So they have identified certain projects, whether they already have funding secured or, as Mr. Reynolds had mentioned, smaller projects that are easier to complete, that don't require, long-term planning. So throughout the presentation, you'll see those are the projects that the individual departments have determined is their high priority.
And this is just in the slides, right? This is
just in the slides.
Well, thank you. Was there a reason that it wasn't included in the staff report? Was it not ready yet?
No, but that's a great suggestion for next time. I'll be sure to include that. I just like to highlight those high priorities throughout the presentation versus just, drawing attention to them in the staff report. But I'll do that for next time.
I appreciate that, Ms. Velasquez. That was actually going to be one of my comments. So if you're here, I'll just direct it at you. I feel that if I understood hierarchy a little bit, the important, more urgent, more priority projects, it would have allowed me to be able to read and understand a lot better. And for me to be able to support you, that information would have been very useful. So I would definitely ask you to consider putting that in the next time. I was also interested in another form of information, whether or not you have it or if it's something you may consider, I'm always interested in understanding the number of people, how many, which one of these projects affect or serve the most number of people, within our community. And if that becomes one way of measuring priority, obviously there's other ways of measuring priority as well, but it was an interest point for me. And in that way to understand what we can help support funding for in a specific order, if that's ever of concern.
Oh, absolutely.
Ms. Velasquez, I'm going to do a time check here again because of our constraint today. So pardon me, but I'm going to ask you to go offline and ask Commissioner Bonderson to not direct now any comments or questions to you, because I think it will just kind of further our very important and highly valued, but unfortunately, given our time constraints. So if you could just go online, and then Commissioner Bonderson, if you could wrap up your comments so staff can record your comments, and then we'll move on to the next commissioner, again, in the interest of time. Thanks so much for your patience and cooperation.
Absolutely, Chair Schwartz. I actually had a timer on, so I knew I had exactly 60 seconds left. And that was my last comment. And I just want to end by saying I really appreciate that the city is always in search of grant funding to support their projects whenever possible. And that actually concludes my comments and my questions. Your timing
Thank you so much.
Spot on.
Okay. Sorry for having to insert myself there. Commissioner Reed, I saw your camera come on next. Are you ready to do questions and comments then? Can you hear me, Commissioner Reed? Okay, we'll hold on one moment. Make sure your technical support is there. I cannot hear you. Should we continue on and come back to you?
Chair Schwartz, can you hear me now?
Yes, excellent. Go ahead.
Strange. Okay, I think I can go quick. So first question is just in reference to all the boards and commission minutes and input that the report provided. I didn't, considering there were fire department projects and studies listed, I didn't see any feedback from the Fire and Police Commission. Someone could clarify that.
Mr. Hagmark, can you perhaps answer that for Commissioner Reed?
Chair Schwartz, Commissioner Reed, I do not know the answer to that actually, and I was looking to see if there was someone from Police and Fire who is on our discussion today, and I'm not seeing anybody on there. So I think we're gonna have to follow up with you on that.
Okay. Well, the next question would just be in terms of police. And this is why I was curious to see any sort of commentary from that commission. Fire, as part of the fire project section, they had there was a standards of coverage study. There were things that I had a few questions for fire, but in terms of police, why weren't there any why didn't any projects show up for that? I was curious. I know we have a big one in the pipeline with the station, but I didn't see anything for police in the report.
Yeah, most of the work for police is probably handled through facilities. I don't know if Angela is on, can speak to some of those projects, but yeah, these are new items, and I think the police station has been on the CIP list for a while, so that's probably why it's not in this particular list today.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then I was also a little, this might be best directed to Ms. Zachary of Parks and Rec. But just in looking through the applicable general plan policies, specifically like under open space, parks and recreation policies, and all that supports. I was just a little surprised to see only 2 Parks and Rec projects. I know you guys have a lot going on, but I just love some feedback on that.
Chair Schwartz and Commissioner Reed, you are correct. We have many projects going on. You're only reviewing, the Planning Commission is only reviewing new projects today. So the projects that you have heard about and will hear more about in the next year include those related to Ortega Park, Dwight Murphy Field. We've got other projects that are going on in city parks that will come before the Planning Commission, plus some that just go through design review. So they wouldn't come before the Planning Commission necessarily because of the approvals required. We are proposing 2 new projects as you see on this list, but we have many additional projects which I'd be happy to forward to the Planning Commission under separate cover if you'd like.
Great. And Ms. Zachary, I think I probably already know your answer, but in terms of general plan priorities, calling for variety and abundance in terms of open space, city shall develop a variety of ways and options to support acquisition and maintenance of public open space, etc. Do you feel like your department is being prioritized?
Chair Schwartz and Commissioner Reed, when it comes to the acquisition of new land by the department, it has largely been done in association with land adjacent to creeks through Measure B revenues. The city general fund has not supported acquisition of any land in my tenure at the city and probably some time. So from that standpoint, It's not something we actively pursue. Our focus is more on addressing the myriad of infrastructure needs, because so many of our parks have not been reinvested in for 50 or more years, and we have significant infrastructure issues that we're really focusing our resources toward.
Gotcha. Thank you, Ms. Zachary. I got most of my questions answered offline, so I think that should do it. And in terms of comments, it's impressive to see how well organized our city is. This is my first time doing a review of the CIP. And I support a lot of what Commissioner Wiscombe said. I think this is pretty well balanced in terms of new projects. And I was particularly impressed with the airport department. I think considering the record demand we're seeing, those are just really worthwhile improvements, and particularly how they target enhancing passengers' experience going to and from. Overall, it's a wonderful presentation and a great list. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Reed. Commissioner Lodge, would you like to go next with questions and comments?
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. Excuse me. Mr. Hagmark, thank you for your answers to my questions that I submitted yesterday via email. Part of your response has raised another question. And it is relating to Accela, no surprise. You say, IT is currently working on hiring a city staff person to be an Accela administrator, which will provide critical support to community development and public works. Is this part of the problem with Accela itself, and that it's just not user-friendly as it should be? Or was this anticipated?
You know, maybe I can have Matt Ford jump on again on that. From what I understood, we initially started off obviously with consultant support services, but I think we were figuring out what we needed long-term, and maybe I'll have Matt back speak to that. Go ahead, Matt.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Schwartz, Ms. Lodge. Yeah, it's a good question. So that is exactly the approach that we took. We didn't know what we would need, and it's hard to backtrack. It's hard to hire and realize that we overstepped, and to retract that. It's always much easier to start with an internal team, use third-party consultants as needed, and then as we move into, more permanent usage, if we determine that full-time work is necessary and warranted, then we'll do that. And that's where we are. So it's not uncommon that large enterprise applications like this require, dedicated human resources in order to sustain them. The benefit of this, or the rationale behind it, is we put all of this investment, monetary, time, resources into getting this application into place. Now let's leverage it to its greatest extent. Let's get it, fully working for us instead of us working for it. And so this is in line with what other jurisdictions have done as we survey other jurisdictions that have brought on Accela and maximized it to all kinds of permit types. And you're seeing that now. You're seeing us expand well beyond building applications to fire permits, to special event permitting, to potentially parking permits and waterfront, potentially. So we're seeing that expansion now, and we want to meet the needs of the land development team and to city customers. And so we feel like we've found the right person who will be able to not only catch us up where we are, but help us to chart that course into the future and really divest ourselves from third-party contractors and use our in-house talent.
Thank you. Okay. That's my only question, Madam Chair. No problem making the finding. This is consistent with these new projects are consistent with the general plan. All the items listed, the new projects listed relating to sea level rise, bring to the forefront the issues that the city is going to, some of the major issues the city is going to have to confront in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lodge. Vice Chair Escobedo, before I go to you, I want to ask Commissioner Reed if he'd like to come back, because we do have interim fire chief Chris Males available to answer questions. Commissioner Reed, if you would like to come back and ask questions of the interim fire chief.
Thank you, Chair Schwartz. Thank you, Chief. I actually got my question answered, so I'm good to go.
Well, this is my first time here, and that was easy for me. So thank you very much. I'm here. I was trying to get the chat open. I was trying to raise my hand, but it wasn't quite working. So I am definitely here for anybody and everybody that has questions.
I guess I will ask you, Chief, if you know there were any comments available or provided by the Fire and Police Commission?
Chairperson Reed, Chair Schwartz, we did not take it to the Police and Fire Commission yet. Our meeting is actually this next week. This came to us via the city administrator and myself because we felt these were really important projects looking ahead at some of the other issues that we're going to be facing. We are looking at potentially moving to a regional fire department dispatch center. And we need to really take a look at our community risk assessment and really get down in the weeds as far as how our fire apparatus are doing covering the city. So that's the concept behind the standards of coverage study. Is are our stations in the correct spot? Are we responding to calls correctly? Are we responding with the right apparatus? What time are our calls happening? All questions like that. And that's what gets answered with the standards of coverage study. So we're really kind of putting the pieces together, looking at a regional dispatch concept, looking at how our fire department responds to calls. And then the other capital improvement request is for, it says automatic vehicle response and routing. That's a really technical term for GPS. We're looking at moving to GPS-based dispatch rather than our fixed districts. And that's going to have a impact on our standards of coverage study, as it will greatly change response times and how our apparatus are dispatched to calls. So the two kind of go hand in hand together. Does that make sense?
It does. Thank you. That's it for me. Thank you both.
Thank you, Commissioner Reed. Again, just if you could, one moment, Vice Chair Escobedo. Oh, Mr. Males, I was going to ask if any other commissioners who have already asked their questions, if anybody else would like to come back on while we have our interim fire chief with us to value his time and also get any questions answered. But I didn't hear any other commissioners asking about the fire department, but I'll just pause for a moment to see if anyone would like to ask a question. Okay. If you don't mind just standing by, Mr. Males, while we continue on, if you have the time, that would be greatly appreciated.
No problem. I'm here. Thank you. No problem.
Thank you so much. Okay. Vice Chair Escobedo, now it's to you. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I'm going to ask Mr. Males to come back on. Sorry about that, Mr. Males.
Okay, I'm back.
Just get it out of the way. And I think you partially answered this. And Mr. Bolton, this can be found on, give me 1 second, page 17 of the staff report. And this is regarding the automatic vehicle response and routing, which you briefly touched on. Is this also going to play a role in that regional fire approach that we're going to have? And can you speak a little bit more about that regional approach versus, because I think, if I remember correctly, we're going to be partnering with local jurisdictions to kind of cover close by areas. Is that right?
That is correct. Let me give you just a little bit of history quickly, if I can. Commissioner Escobedo and to Chairperson Schwartz. Thanks a lot. And just those of you that haven't met me before, I'm Chris Males. I'm the interim chief for the City Fire Department. And thanks for having me. Thanks for letting me be here. Currently, our fire engines are dispatched by what we would call fixed response districts. The best way to describe that is that our city has literally postage stamps that are overlaid over the city map, and that each one of those postage stamps represents a district. And if a call happens in that district, the fire engine assigned to that district would go to the call. This is technology that is really outdated, and those of us that have ever ordered a Lyft or an Uber knows that we get the closest Lyft, we get the closest Uber unit. So what we're looking at doing is moving us over currently in this next fiscal year to GPS-based dispatch. And what that does is that puts all of our fire engines by the second that as they're moving around, the computer calculates which unit is closest. And if they find a half a second difference in calculated response time, it gives that fire engine the call. So really, instead of these fixed districts, the engines that are moving around town doing this, a call happens and the computer goes, you're it, you're gonna be going to the call. So it's a really more effective and efficient and timely way of dispatching our units. It's a really complex system, and it's actually pretty amazing that if a fire engine is actually in its station, it adds a time penalty to the response. In other words, it says, hey, engine 75 is in their station. It's gonna take them a minute to get out of the station. I'm gonna grab this fire engine that might be further away geographically, but because they're already in their engine and driving, they actually can get there quicker. So it happens, instantaneously via computer. So it's a really efficient way of dispatching. To your question about regional fire dispatch, yes, that's still on the table for the city fire department. All of the departments in the county of Santa Barbara are looking at moving to a regional dispatch concept. It is simply this. It's send the right resource to the right patient or the right call at the right time, regardless of jurisdiction. And what that means is that we're going to drop all of our boundaries. There's no more city fire response. There's no more county fire response. It's simply sending the closest unit regardless of jurisdiction. So I'll hypothetically give you, say there's a call at the Santa Barbara Mission. Well, right up the street in Mission Canyon is a county fire station that is closer than our city fire station. And under that concept, the closest fire engine is going to get sent. What does that do for us? Instead of having 7 fire stations in downtown, in the city proper, we have a Montecito fire station that sits on the outskirts. We have a county fire station that sits in Mission Canyon, and we have another county fire station that sits on Hollister Avenue. What does that do for us? That basically bumps us up by 3 fire engines that are able to respond into the city at any given time. Now, conversely, that also works. If we're closer to a call in Montecito, we would go to that call in Montecito. And it really boils down to this. What does the citizen want? Does the citizen care what color the fire truck is or what the patch is on the firefighter's shirt? No, they want whoever can get to their call the quickest. And that's the concept behind the regional dispatch. And it's a couple of years out, but we've got a lot of data and a lot of information, and we're working on securing the funding. And I think it's going to be a really good thing for the entire community, whether you live in the city or not. It's going to, again, give us more fire engines at our disposal to be able to respond and to be able to mitigate an emergency.
Thank you so much for that in-depth answer. And I'm personally really excited about this, and especially when you look at the price tag, the upside is just huge. So I'm fully in support of this. I think this is definitely in line with the general plan. Thank you so much, Chief Males. And that's my only question for you.
Okay, thank you for letting me respond. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Just a couple more questions, Madam Chair. This one, I believe, would be for either Ms. Parento or Ms. Hetrick. And it's regarding just sea level rise in general. And hello, Ms. Hetrick. Are there currently sea level rise related grant funding available? And then do we anticipate further funding on the horizon based on either recent budgets that have been passed federally and at the state level? And can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure, Chair Schwartz and Commissioner Escobedo. So right now there is sea level rise funding. A lot of it centers around either local coastal program planning or natural solutions to sea level rise. So things like dune restoration, wetland restoration projects. And so actually, we are in the process of applying for funding for things like the shoreline monitoring program and potentially modifications to our sediment management plan through that type of funding. There was, prior to COVID, there were a number of legislative proposals to expand funding for other types of sea level rise projects. That did get delayed. But it wouldn't surprise me if those resurface in the next year or two. There's also been some funding related to transportation, so like Highway 101, our major transportation corridors. I will say that there is a lack of funding to really implement projects that are infrastructure related that might not be able to take a natural dune restoration approach. And so that is something that as part of an adaptation program, we would want to be talking to our state and federal representatives like, hey, this is a need that we have, and hoping that we can get some legislative proposals on the floor for that type of activity. The other thing that we'll be pursuing in the harbor area is assistance from the Army Corps of Engineers with some of the more structural issues associated out there. So raising the breakwater, raising the groin, raising the sand spit. It's possible that we could seek funding and assistance through the Army Corps now for those projects. Then they are beginning to consider sea level rise in their funding as well. So that's another avenue. But right now, what we are finding is that we are ahead of a lot of other jurisdictions, and that we are hearing a lot from the state and federal government that they actually need to hear from us what our needs are. And so that is going to be a focus of the implementation of the plan.
Okay. Yeah, that's exciting to hear that you are going to be having conversations with state and federal representatives for our region so that we can advocate for further funding. Because I agree with you, I think we are ahead of the curve, but a lot of these implementation measures, I imagine, are going to be quite costly versus doing the initial studies. So that's the only question I had for you. Thank you, Ms. Hetrick. I believe my last couple of questions are going to be for Ms. Zachary. And Mr. Bolton, you can go to page 28 of the staff report. And this is regarding the Ambassador Park Chumash Cultural Project. And I just was hoping that if you could speak to the collaboration that we've done with the Chumash on this particular project and how it informed the project.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Schwartz, Commissioner Escobedo. We've been working on defining this project for a couple of years, working with Coastal Conservancy staff, as well as a large group of Chumash representatives, defining, what approaches could be taken to honor the cultural and the heritage of the Chumash in our community, particularly as it relates to what is now called Ambassador Park, but has had a very long history, cultural history for the Chumash peoples. And then move forward with defining the project enough to be able to secure the funds from the Coastal Conservancy to initiate the conceptual planning and design. So now that the project funds, so you'll see in the capital program current year budget of $50,000, that is a grant that we received from the Coastal Conservancy. It was just approved by the City Council and the Coastal Conservancy. So starting well, hopefully sooner rather than later because of COVID, we will initiate the community engagement and conceptual design process. There's definitely interest in what could and should be there, but we are going to continue to collaborate and have discussions about how to move forward with achieving that.
That's fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for just providing a little bit of context for that particular project. And then my last and final question is regarding, and Mr. Bolton, this is found on page 24 of our staff report. And it's the Faulkner Gallery kitchen renovation. I was wondering if it would be Parks and Recreation. Ms. Zachary, I was wondering if Parks and Recreation would be using this kitchen for potential programming, or would that be more of a library function? Because I do see that there's some synergy between whether it's youth camps and having some cooking classes or specific cooking classes that could be held through Parks and Recreation, even if it's in the library.
Sure, Chair Schwartz and Commissioner Escobedo. Certainly, we work with the library department on a lot of collaborative efforts. They're currently using our city parks to do some of their programming since indoor opportunities aren't possible. As this project moves forward and they look at different ways to take advantage of a kitchen facility, there could be additional ways for us to collaborate, particularly as the Library Plaza project also moves forward. I would imagine that for the library itself, it's also an opportunity for them to generate some revenue for their programs and services. And just like Parks and Recreation, always looking at ways that augment our funding since we're not fully funded by the general fund.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you so much. And Madam Chair, I'm just going to move into my comments if that's okay. And just wanted to start and echo Commissioner Reed's comment that this is impressive. Again, as our first CIP process, this is really encouraging and exciting on the horizon of some of the things that we can see in the city. I am just going to kind of go through a few of just the highlights from reviewing. One, I'm a huge fan of the sea level rise projects that have been incorporated in here. I'm particularly interested in how we can advocate for more funding, especially on the implementation side. It sounds like there may be grant opportunities already for the studies and some of the natural solutions, but can we start getting ahead of the implementation process and advocate for some of those funding opportunities? Next is the Eastside Library, the improvements to the Eastside Library. I am a huge fan of those. I used to live close to Mission and State Street, so I can definitely say that there is, that lighting there is much needed for the safety of that area. And so just wanted to highlight that project. I can attest, we did this at UCSB and we're currently doing it with another program, that the benefits of moving software to the cloud, they're huge, especially given what happened with COVID. And if there are natural disasters in the future, it's going to be important that we can access those without being on site. Like Commissioner Wiscombe mentioned, I would love to see, as part of the geospatial inventory of bike infrastructure, that there is some sort of work study or internship program for students. I think that's a valuable opportunity for either, whether it's working with local universities or if it's a high school student, offering them an opportunity to get involved with shared mobility would be huge. The kitchen, as I just talked about, I think there's a lot of synergies between what the city currently offers. We offer plenty of opportunities, and we are especially lucky that we have so many outdoor opportunities to engage in physical wellness. I think this is an opportunity for us to also educate and provide nutritional wellness opportunities, and hopefully that we can provide those to our youth programs, whether it's youth camps or partnering with high schools and middle schools, that we can build that healthy relationship with nutrition early, because that's when it's going to be the most impactful. So I'd like to see that, but I'm very, very excited about that project. And I think those are all of my comments, and I can find all of these projects in line with the general plan. And that is it for me, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Escobedo. Commissioner Higgins, questions and comments?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So just general questions. So I believe when we've done these in the past, we've seen the whole CIP and not just the added projects. Is this a new format going forward that we'll see in another 2 years? Maybe
Perhaps we could ask, Mr. Hagmark to come back.
And just to confirm my recollection, I think we usually see everything, right?
Based on my understanding of this, we only have new projects in here. That has been the format in the past. I know with Water Commission, just for example, we spent a good hour talking about all of the CIP that's going on in water and wastewater. So it's pretty extensive. I would expect from other divisions and CIPs, they're pretty detailed. These here just represent the new stuff that.
But the process or the requirement is every 2 years, the Planning Commission needs to find that the whole CIP is consistent or just the new stuff? Or is that really the same thing? Because by extension, we've already found that the old stuff is.
That's correct. That's
okay. Okay. So I'm going to dive into some real quick. I'll just say, get it out of the way. I mean, I don't see a conflict with our general plan here. So not that there was any drama around that, but I do want to ask some questions while I have some of the staff members. The Chumash project for 2022 and 2023 is 300,000. That's, if Ms. Zachary, I guess you could come back on. That's basically the study and not the infrastructure or the capital, right?
Chair Schwartz, Commissioner Higgins, that is a guesstimate to get us to where we might be partially funding construction. The concept is not to do extensive development of this site, in part because of the cultural resources that it already has. And it's essentially a placeholder. The 50,000 will get us through conceptual and design review at the Historic Landmarks Commission. And at that point, we would have to go back to the Coastal Conservancy and the Coastal Commission with a further defined project to figure out what the total funding would be. So it's just a placeholder for now because we don't have enough of a definition.
So that'll come back for a CDP. That may come back for a CDP to us then, right?
That's correct, Commissioner Higgins.
Similar question with the Plaza Del Mar band shell renovation. The 175, is that capital related or plan related?
Chair Schwartz, Commissioner Higgins, when you drive by Plaza Del Mar and you look at the band shell, it looks like it's in great shape, but if you walk up to it, you realize that it is significantly undermined structurally. It has not received any city resources for a very long time. So the idea here is actually we could probably repair it and rehab it for about 350,000. Currently working with nonprofit organizations to try to co-fund that because the band shell is a perfect place to have an outdoor concert as we transition from COVID to post-COVID to maybe what we used to do before. We're currently have an RFP out for engineering and architectural services to define everything that's needed to repair the band shell.
So the 350 includes the actual construction costs.
That's an estimate as well, and it's based on a rough estimate that we received. So again, until we dig in,
I understand. Okay, bike facilities. Who wants to take a BMP implementation phase 2 question? Ms. Grant.
Chair Schwartz and Commissioner Higgins.
So if this is a segment of only new CIP projects, isn't what's in this, on this slide, I guess it's slide 32, aren't those projects up there in the top right in the colored light blue, aren't those already a part of the existing bike master plan?
Yes, that is correct. That they are part of the existing bicycle master plan. With our last CIP, there was a focus on to get projects done by year or fiscal year 2020. And a lot of those are either have been completed or in design will be completed shortly. So this is kind of the next round. And so we added a new project title in the CIP to recognize phase 2. But we're also we're writing grants already for phase 3. So it all sort of, they all merge together.
So these are not new projects that have been being added to the existing BMP, correct? Just
Correct.
a reshuffling of the priorities?
Yeah, they have, some of them have been renamed or they've merged into a particular project. For example, you'll see like on this list, the Chino Street Bike Boulevard, and let's see, Sola Bike Boulevard. Well, those are all part of the West Side Paseos project. And the Chino Street Bike Boulevard was actually part of another planning effort under further analysis, has actually been changed and approved by council to move that Bike Boulevard to Gillespie and Sola Streets.
The Foothill Enhanced route, that's the route that goes by Peabody School?
Correct.
About time. I've only been hassling Mr. Dayton about that for about 15 years. Okay, so bike facilities, MoDOT multi-use path extension to city limit. Just the next slide down.
Okay.
That just strikes me as really expensive, $1.5 million for 1/10 of a mile. Is that in addition to the BMP or, and why is it so expensive?
So that section, thank you for blowing that up, Timmy. Yes, that is one where, as you see under construction right now, the Las Positas multi-use, Las Positas and MoDOT multi-use path. And so there is this little gap between that project and the city limit line. Since we've been working on this project, the county has received approvals from the Active Transportation Program to continue on this multi-use path to the Oberon Trail. So there is a small gap, but of course, everything in this area has been very difficult for design and construction. So there is in this one piece, I am taking, that photo that I took is in the flat portion. There is a steeper section that would require, I think, a pretty significant retaining wall. But we would need to figure that out through design. So this is our best estimate at this time for that.
So is this extension kind of an amendment to the bike master plan?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So got some public works, Islay Bridge. And I just really wanted to understand kind of what I'm looking at. So 2021, there's 1.5 million. And then 2025, it's 7.5 million. So just the way it is charted, it looks like there's studies and permits or whatever, and at 1.5 million. And then 3 years later, there's actual construction costs. Am I reading that correctly?
That would be, I think if Timmy could go to, page, I think it's 37. There we go. So so for the year, for the 2022 would be the preliminary analysis and design, and with 2025 being the estimated construction.
got it. Couple more questions, I'll be out of your hair. State Street Promenade,
Yes.
2 more slides. It shows 80 million. That's a big ticket. What's going on there?
Could we get that particular page? I think that's of interest
Yeah.
to
Yes.
a number of
Yeah, that's
commissioners.
future meetings, so,
I think that's page 39. So Commissioner Higgins, we had to give our best guess at this time. And yeah, is for right now, we're estimating potentially 80 million based upon feedback that we have heard. As you know, Mr. Dayton, the transportation manager, has gone on a roadshow for tons of the city commissions and stakeholders. There will be more dialogue as we progress this year. So at this point in time, we wanted to acknowledge that there will be something coming, but we don't know the entire scope of what it entails.
okay. Because it just says planters, bollards, bicycle wayfinding signage at 80 million. So it seems like it's an overestimate, I'm hearing. Last one, just and put it in to kind of move into comments, Madam Chair. The Kyriel sidewalk infill is really sorely needed. That is, people basically walk on a freeway on-ramp or off-ramp. So happy to see that in there. I get off on that off-ramp on the Las Positas a couple times a day. So I'm glad to see that. Those are my questions, Madam Chair, and I think I can find that the project meets our general plan.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Higgins. Commissioner Reed, did you want to come back with anything in particular?
Yeah, Chair Schwartz, I just wanted to point out to Commissioner Higgins, I think what you were referencing in terms of the State Street Promenade was the interim features, not the long-term capital improvement project, which factors for stormwater, bike lanes, street furniture, et cetera. I think what you were just noting was the interim.
Yeah. The 80 million looks like it might be a subway connection.
Chair Schwartz, Commissioner Higgins, I apologize. Yes, so this would be the future, the long-term potential vision for the State Street Promenade. What you're seeing right now being installed is sort of the phase 2 with the potted plants that have been recently installed. So that had a different budget. This is the big one.
Cool, can't wait. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Commissioner Higgins. I think what I'm going to do now, before I go to my questions and comments, we're almost at 2:50. Let's take a 10-minute break and return at 3 o'clock. I think I called on all of my colleagues before going, just looking to see if I overlooked anyone. I think that's everyone. So let's go with Commissioner Lodge before we go to a 10-minute recess. Did you want anything? Then when we come back from a 10-minute recess, I'm going to go ahead and make my questions and comments, and then we can come back because we'll have time. We can come back around.
About even doing that. Do you have so many that we need to take a break and come back? Since we're not doing the administrative agenda, why don't you just do your thing and we'll be done?
Well, we may have time to do our administrative agenda, but I also, if we have time, since we curtailed so many questions and comments, particularly questions, if we do have time, I want to give my colleagues the opportunity to ask any follow-on questions as they've been hearing from other colleagues and hearing from staff. Again, we would normally, as you'll recall, Commissioner Lodge, spend in-depth time on such significant projects in the city. So today we're just curtailed. So let's go ahead and take a break. And I don't think I'm going to need that much time, but I do want to get questions and comments in. So let's go ahead and take a 10-minute break, and we'll be back at 3 o'clock. Thanks to everyone. Reconvene the City of Santa Barbara Planning Commission meeting for January 21st, 2021. We are back from break, and if we could resume our hearing on our draft 5-year capital improvement program. I would like to begin my questions by, thank you, Commissioner Higgins. I see you're back. Excellent. I'd like Mr. Bolton to put back up page 39 of 110 in our packet, and Commissioner Higgins was asking about this project. This is the Public Works Streets / Transportation. I think Ms. was answering a question. I have one quick follow-on question for you, Ms. Grant.
Yes.
Thank you. What I'm not clear about is how the 80 million price tag was established, given where we are in the information gathering, the surveying, the information gathering. That's part one of my question. And the second part is, how is it that it doesn't appear anywhere on the 5-year timeline? I don't see anything, through 2026. So it just kind of a generalized future needs identifier. Can you shed any light on that for me?
Sure. All of our capital projects hit at different times. And so for this one, we do not have enough of the scope yet to identify it in a particular fiscal year. So that's why we put it as a future year item, nor do we have any funding source identified at that time. Again, that's why we have it in the future needs. And again, as far as this is scoping, I believe one of the other commissioners alluded to it too. It depends just what the future, is it going to stay as a street, or are we going to have pavers? There's a lot of tons of utilities under the street that would need to be addressed. And of course, stormwater and all of those. I'm constantly amazed of how expensive our capital infrastructure projects are. Just to put a little access ramp at a corner could be $10,000 to $12,000. So this is several blocks long of potential very large improvements again. So we're being very extremely conservative on the costs, but just given other projects that we've done, it adds up. And so we wanted to have at least a ballpark item. Again, as we further scope this out and get direction from City Council for that, we will be able to refine it as we go along. And I would expect in the next 2-year capital program, we'd have much more details on this.
Okay, that's what I was wondering. Thank you so the 80 million, this is just the high end of what we see here in the last sentence under status, which is a range of 40 to 80 million. So you're just taking the top end of that for this. Okay.
Correct. In my experience, capital projects always cost more than you think. So we decided to take the higher number.
Yes, I know that's the case there. Thank you, Ms. Grant, for that. Then I would like to ask, I don't know if this is to Mr. Hagmark. I know this you may not be able to answer this, but Commissioner Reed asked about both fire and police. And I just was wondering if you had any further information about why there are literally no projects. Let me just go back over the list in our staff report. We have pages 3 and 4 of the complete list here of the new projects. With a deteriorating facility over there on Figueroa Street and not knowing a timeline at all of the approval and construction of a brand new police headquarters. I'm just wondering why there are no improvements within the next 5 years, at least to try to bring the current headquarters to some semblance of kind of health and safety environment.
Thank you, Chair Schwartz. I'm going to have Angela Oslin, Facilities Manager, take on that question.
Hold on, Ms. Oslin, we cannot hear you. No, we can't hear you. you're still, there's something still with your audio. I think what I'll do in the interest of time, if you could work on that, Miss Osland. No, we still cannot hear you. So let me do this. If I could ask you to work on that, I'm not sure with whom, but maybe you and Mr. Busk or you and Mr. Hagmark can work on that. And I'll just keep going with my questions in the interest of our time constraints today. But I would like to hear from you on that. Okay, so if you could go offline, I'll go ahead and continue on then. I think my next question is maybe Ms. Hetrick, if you could come on, and Mr. Hagmark, you could stay on, I believe. Well, again, I'll just ask it of Ms. Hetrick, and then we'll figure out if there's a kind of a group of you who may need to respond. Ms. Hetrick, I'm looking at the various sea level rise adaptation projects that really span a number of departments. So on page 4 of the staff report, Mr. Bolton, I think it's just 4 of the staff report, we see sea level rise appearing in public works, sustainability and resilience, and waterfront. So my question is, do you have a sense at this time about how these projects are going to be coordinated and integrated into the larger sea level rise adaptation planning process? Because this cuts across a number of departments, and I don't know how you're thinking of bringing it all together so there's some synchronicity to the project and project planning. Any thoughts you have for me on that?
Sure, Chair Schwartz. So we are working through all the details of implementation now. And so I think the thinking at this point is that there would be a central staff team in sustainability and resilience that would coordinate the overall program. So that would be basically taking a look at all the action items in the near term, helping to prioritize them, helping to find funding, make sure they're scoped properly, et cetera. And also helping to designate who is actually going to be implementing this project, which department will be responsible. And so we've made a preliminary preliminary take at that with this capital improvement program of deciding who would take responsibility for what project. So for instance, the projects that are in the harbor, clearly that's under the Waterfront's area of expertise, and that they would want to lead that project. But that will also require input from the adaptation program, who's coordinating technical studies for sea level rise across the city. And in some cases, portions of the harbor and issues related to sea level rise there may tie into other infrastructure projects that need to happen. So for instance, like our sewer system is adjacent to the bike path, and that we might want to look at that at the same time that we look at issues in the harbor and things like that. So one of the purposes of the adaptation program in the sustainability and resilience department would be to coordinate those type of studies when it would be beneficial.
Yeah,
so,
yes,
Mr. Hagmark, please.
I was going to say, Chair Schwartz, I was going to just add on to what Ms. Hetrick had to say there. Water Resources has put $500,000 in for the next 5 years between water and wastewater to begin that studying, planning effort. And we certainly don't believe that's enough by itself. And so it is going to be a partnering with Waterfront, parks, all the other infrastructure that is going to be impacted by sea level rise. So we'll be leveraging that because certainly, I've been getting asked this question, what are you going to do with all your utilities? Blah, blah, blah. Well, it really depends on what the city's going to do, right? You can't just come up with a plan for one element. So we're really wanting this to be a joint plan. And I think by pooling our money together, I think we're going to get the most bang for our buck as far as, output, documents, and kind of a larger plan. But we're still working through the details about who will be the lead on that.
Well, speaking of the lead, that was going to be my last question on this. In Exhibit A, in any of these documents in Exhibit A by department, will a new coordinator, or have you identified or no, incorporated a new coordinator and the funding for that in Exhibit A in our document? Do you know where that coordinator is going to reside, by department, by functional group? And then have we also estimated that cost, whether we need to go get additional grant funding or otherwise? Can you help me with that at all?
I was just gonna, if Alelia is around, I know she has a plan for staffing plan, and I know Water Resources is part of funding some of those positions if they come around, and that was part of, again, as we get going here, the momentum gets going, the idea would be to add that additional staffing to help support the sea level rise programming.
I want to just make sure I asked it clearly enough, Mr. Hackmark. I'm asking if there's going to be and pardon me if you were answering this, but I didn't quite hear it to my ability to understand. I'm looking for a single overarching coordinating position so that there's synchronicity among these three, let's just say these three departments. Is it going to be out of long range planning, where Ms. Hetrick you are now, or Water Resources, or somewhere else? Is that, were you getting at that and I just couldn't quite connect the dots there, Mr. Hagmark?
Yes, I apologize. So the new sustainability department, resiliency, they're going to be the lead coordinator on this planning effort. And they have a staffing plan, which they have not filled those positions because we haven't really got going. But the idea is to staff up, and various departments, including Water Resources and Public Works, will be participating in the cost of those positions, which are not captured here in this, which are not captured in this CIP work.
Okay, so thank you for that. That's helpful. So this position that I see, or well, it's defined as a project, Sustainability and Resilience Department. Again, Mr. Bolton, back on page 4 of the staff report. It's identified as Sea Level Rise Program Development and Administration. That's what you're talking about, right? A coordinating role. And then there'll be financial participation from the other departments in supporting this, because it's going to be an orchestrating or coordinating role across departments with the overarching responsibility of sea level rise, again, program development and administration. Okay, and then why isn't the funding anticipated or required anticipated funding for that incorporated into the Exhibit A tables in our document today?
You know, the conversation, I don't know the exact answer to that, but I know the conversation today is about CIP specifically and not about staffing costs. So staffing costs are kind of captured on another element. CIP is typically does not have staffing resources put in it, but you know, I wish Alelia, I know Rebecca couldn't make she had to leave at 3 as she oversees that department, but Alelia, I don't know if she is she may have had dropped off, but they could speak more specifically to your question.
No, that's all right. I think this is, again, in the interest of time. Okay. Let me come back to this list to see then. Let me see, is Miss thank you, Miss Hetrick. You can go ahead and go offline. Is Miss Osland now, does she have audio to come back on and answer my question about police department and why there are no projects here for facilities upgrades, capital upgrades? Yes, excellent. Welcome, Miss Osland.
Hi. So generally speaking, my understanding is the philosophy that helped determine what type of funding was going to be spent on the police department in the big scheme of the capital project, this ongoing new design, really limited the amount of funds that facilities was going to put into the existing building. And the reason is because obviously we wouldn't want to invest in a building that we're going to leave above and beyond ordinary operations and maintenance. That said, we do continue to provide resources to repair and maintain that particular facility, as well as provide support and minor renewal. We've done some of those projects for the animal control building.
Okay, and one last question regarding the police department and from what you just said. So Was the police department solicited for this feedback and said no facilities, I'll call it facilities improvement projects, are needed at this time or warranted? I'm just wondering what the communication was like between facilities and police department.
That's a good question. The police department and the facilities team have quarterly meetings, and at that time we get together and decide if there are projects that we need to pursue intermediately. But otherwise, Brad Hess, who is the project manager for the larger capital improvement project, is in contact with the police department.
Okay, I'm just going to assume from that answer that if I were to ask someone in the police department, a senior person, that they did not recommend or request any facilities improvements projects such that they're not on this list. Is that that's what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, I have not heard of any. Correct.
Okay, all right, thank you, Ms. Oslin. And my last grouping of questions, Mr. Four, I think this might be for you, and it connects the information technology department and these three projects that are again on, well, they're on page 3 of our staff report, Mr. Bolton. I'm interested in the connection between IT and library department. Now I see in the library department, there are 4 projects here, but I don't see them as enhancing what I'll call the virtual or online or digital dimensions of our library services. And those have been so crucial to the community during this public health crisis that we've had, that I'm just wondering if the library department has been solicited for financial support, maybe through IT, to continue to help them build out and be of great service to the community in that way. Mr. Four, any thoughts for me on that?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I can tell you that information technology does work very closely with the library. All of the projects that are listed, for example, the Office 365 upgrade, those would have a direct benefit to the library. In this past year, IT replaced nearly every black gold machine on the spot when support ended. The library recently hired a technician for their IT needs, and that person trains with the IT department, comes to our weekly staff meetings. There's infinite information sharing and crossover. So, the library is one of our biggest customers, and it shows in the way that we work with them. So yes, I mean, the nexus is strong.
Thank you, Mr. Four. Okay, very good. I think I'll go right into my comments then. Thank you again, Mr. Four, for being available. I am going to find these projects as consistent with the general plan. A few highlights for me that are really companion comments to my areas of questioning, and I want to start with where I left off, which is this very important connectivity between information technology and the library department and the critical support that IT provides. I'm anticipating that as we continue to move through this COVID environment, and my deep concern for the education of our youth, knowing how many thousands of them are needing to learn online remotely, and we don't know when we're going to be able to really go back full-time, part-time, full-time to the classroom. Our library department is an essential resource, always has been, but in my opinion, even now more than ever, for our community, educationally, culturally. And so I'm really hoping that that synergy between IT and library continues in that way. Am a bit concerned about the fact that I don't see any facility improvement projects here for the police department. But again, if that's acceptable to the police management, I leave that with them. I was recalling that back in 2011, our planning commission had a site visit at the police, top to bottom at the police headquarters. We saw firsthand the conditions, and that was now going on 10 years ago, at a price tag of $50 million to replace, which is now ballooned far beyond even the 80 million that I think we were told several years ago as the new police station was coming forward to Planning Commission for concept review. So I think it's anyone's guess as to when we're going to get a new police station actually permitted and constructed, to tell you the truth. And I just hope that those who work day in and day out in our police headquarters feel that they're getting the incremental facilities support, that is the quality of the environment, the health of the environment that they feel they need, and of course that they so deserve. Very glad to see that between the three departments I mentioned that all have sea level rise adaptation programming and projects affiliated with them, that we're going to have an overarching coordinating role in sustainability and resilience, that new department. I want to just make one comment that was sort of a question in my mind, and I think Mr. Hagmark commented on this, that these projects that we have, these 57 projects, I don't know if this is correct across all 57, Mr. Hagmark, but you mentioned that staffing, that is the human resources needs connected to each one of these projects, are not built into the anticipated costs. Did I hear that correctly? I know on sea level, well, I'll just ask you that. Did I hear that correctly?
I will do my best to answer that. If there are folks in here who have a different approach to it, I can speak for most of Public Works that the city staff time is not included in this CIP.
Okay.
Water Resources, it's not really a staff. We're really focused on the contracts, construction, physical work that's being done. So this doesn't have a.
Okay. That's what I thought I heard you say. And my only then comment about that is that was of particular interest to me, or of note in my mind, Mr. Hagmark, because when we go out for grant funding, and I'm involved with grant funding, not for the city, but in my private life for nonprofits, my public service to some nonprofit organizations. For grant funding, those grant funders want to see incorporated into the grant amount a percentage for administration. So they want they want to see the fully loaded cost to the grantee or the recipient of the grant. So that just struck me as, I don't want to say unusual, but a question in my mind, because we want to see a fully loaded rate or a fully loaded cost for these projects. And that, of course, includes our staff time, staff resources.
And maybe I should clarify, Chair Schwartz, that we do track that. We do track that with a lot of, let's just say engineering is a great example. They are billable, so they bill to the project. So we're tracking their costs, so that there is an ability to request that be part of the grant. So there is an element of that, yes.
Well, I would just say then, just my own personal suggestion. I think for all decision makers, it's important, and for the public, of course, it's in public to see what fully loaded, I call it fully loaded rates or costs are for these important projects across the city. And as we just now said, you and I, fully loaded means both, I'll call it, the hardscape or the physical, the capital part, but also the human resources or the soft cost, so that we understand the total cost that's required to implement these very important projects, and that we are finding consistent with our general plan. So I'll just leave that's between you and me, and that's my thought on that note. That's all I have. Thank you so much. This is an extraordinary work effort. I, along with a few of my colleagues who have been on the commission for some years, we've reviewed and appreciated so many of these reviews. And it's exciting to see so many important projects on the board. So I'm hoping we can find funding for especially the top priority ones. And that leads me back to, and to conclude, Commissioner Bonderson's question about prioritization. you may recall, Mr. Hagmark, although I think this maybe went back to Ms. Bjork and others, that then Commissioner Jordan and I think were particularly interested year over year in asking about prioritization, because otherwise it's just a long list. In this case, let's say in alpha order, but it doesn't really help us as decision makers and the public as well understand the hierarchy of what we're deeming to be most important for whatever the value sets are, whatever the reasons are. And so I continue to suggest that there be some type of a prioritization by a values hierarchy, and it could be safety first. I'm just throwing, safety first, and then we can go on down from there, something like that. But with that, thank you very much, Mr. Hagmark, and to all of the staff. And I'll just ask my colleagues if in the next 20 minutes, we don't have to go to back to our administrative agenda. If there are any follow-on questions or comments that maybe have been inspired by my colleagues, as you've heard from the other commissioners and staff, anything else that's just now coming back to you that you'd like to ask about or comment on, would welcome you to come online if that's the case. So I'll just wait just a little bit to see if anybody wants to circle back around, since we have a little bit of a buffer here. Okay, I don't see any webcams coming on. Vice Chair Escobedo, please, welcome back.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's just a question about process and if we have to formally motion and vote on whether or not these projects are consistent with the general plan.
Yes, thank you. I was going to invite Ms. DeBusk back on to give us guidance there. And again, this is to the recommendation on page 1 of the staff report in terms of the commission finding. Yes, Ms. DeBusk?
Thank you, Chair Schwartz. Yes, this would just be a motion regarding consistency with the general plan, and then the minutes from this meeting will be forwarded to the City Council.
Very good, thank you. So with that, I'll ask the commissioners to come back on. I didn't see anyone wanting to ask additional questions or making additional comments. So would someone like to make a motion? I think I heard all of us finding the projects to be consistent with the general plan, and we just now need the formality of a motion second. And Commissioner Lodge, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the Planning Commission find that these new projects are consistent with the city's general plan.
Second.
I'll say.
That was a dueling effort on the second. I'm going to go with Commissioner Higgins. And okay. Any discussion on that motion? Seeing none, wait, was somebody going to speak? Did I cut anyone off? No. Ms. Rydell, would you please do a voice vote on that motion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Heidi Rydell. I'll begin the voice roll call vote, and we'll start with Vice Chair Escobedo.
Yes.
Commissioner Lodge?
Yes.
Commissioner Wiscombe?
Yes.
Commissioner Higgins?
Commissioner Higgins?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I
Yes.
can hear you now. Commissioner Reed?
Yes.
Commissioner Bonderson?
Yes.
Chair Schwartz?
Yes.
That is unanimous. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rydell. Very good. So we've concluded this item. Ms. DeBusk, since we had a formal vote, given the nature of the item, do we need to announce an appeal or not on this particular type of new item?
Chair Schwartz, no, there is no appeal for this item.
Thank you very much. Very good. Let's go ahead now. We have a few minutes left, and let's go to our administrative agenda. Are there any committee and liaison reports? Commissioner Higgins?
So nothing to report out of the show. I can talk about the Highway 101. I don't remember the full name of the committee, but it's the design committee. We spent some time yesterday, again, on the Cabrillo Underpass, Hot Springs, and talked a little bit about Union Pacific Railroad and the Los Patos interchange, but only to the extent that there's a design that's becoming closer and closer to being approved by UPRR, and the rest of our discussion really, and that's really not part of the project. Just to remind you all, that's a separate project, but it's so close to that new interchange improvement with Hot Springs and Cabrillo there that we are trying to look at those two things together. Anyway, to the interchange improvement, we just focused on landscaping. And the conversation really was surrounding, plant types, and there was lots of Latin that was discussed or thrown around with plant types. And Commissioner Wiscombe, you would have enjoyed it. It would have been nice to have your feedback on that, but it was more the maintenance obligations and how we're going to land on the right kinds of plantings. We talked about that's some of the safety constraints of on ramps and off ramps. Can't have lots of trees. We really do need to have grasses and low profile shrubs. So that was the bulk of the conversation. And you can fill in anything you think I may have missed, Madam Chair.
No, I think you've covered it all. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Any other reports, committee and liaison reports today? Just looking down the row here. No, okay. Been a little bit of a quiet week since last Thursday, I guess. Okay, very good. I think we're ready and are actually running a few minutes ahead of when we were going to adjourn, but I think that's helpful to have a little bit of a break for those who would like to then begin watching the special city council presentation at 4 o'clock through City TV or through Cox Communications. And again, that's on the 2020 AI Advocacy Design Charrette. Anybody else have anything else in conclusion before I adjourn the hearing today, or from staff for that matter? No, very good. Thanks to all, thanks especially to my colleagues, and of course to all of the staff members who made themselves available today to talk about any of the 57 new capital improvement projects. It's really impressive. And with that, we're adjourned. See you all in early February, if not before. Stay safe and stay well. Bye-bye.